Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. Hurricane Melissa has already caused nearly $50 billion worth of damages in the Caribbean. The storm's not over yet, so joining us now is AccuWeather lead hurricane expert Alex DaSilva. Alex, thanks so much for coming back.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start with the impact that we've seen thus far. AccuWeather estimates roughly 48 to $52 billion worth of damages in the Caribbean. Tell us more about this number.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do, of course, with the physical damage that we saw. We've seen some pretty horrifying pictures coming out of western portions of Jamaica over the last couple of days where that eye wall really went through that area. It was a small eye wall, but it was extremely destructive. It was almost like having a category or an EF4 or EF5 tornado move through a small area. And that's exactly what we've seen, especially around the areas of Black River in western Jamaica that really took that eye wall. But even areas such as Montego Bay, a big tourist spot, also took that eye wall. So, of course, the damage is physical damage, but it also talks about the tourism loss that is for years and years to come. It's going to take months to years to recover fully from the devastation of this storm. And so that's all baked into this total as well. So when you talk about a damage estimate, it's not only about the physical damage, it's about the future damage as well, with tourism loss, insurance premiums, things like that into the future. And that's how we came up with this number of 48 to $52 billion. And that's across all of the Caribbean islands that were impacted by Melissa.
So Jamaica bore the brunt, but can you take us through the trajectory? Where did Melissa hit and where is it right now?
Yeah, certainly. So we'll start off with where it hit. This is all the storms in the Atlantic Basin for the 2025 season. But you can see Melissa down here at the bottom of your screen here, kind of meandered around down here south of Hispaniola for a while. And that's why we were so concerned about those big rainfall totals that we would be measuring in feet and not inches in a lot of these areas. So the storm just kind of meandered around down here and then slowly intensified before shooting across western Jamaica and then eastern Cuba, and then heading up into the Atlantic. So we'll take a look at where the storm is right now. If we flip to the satellite here we go. The storm made a move west of Bermuda earlier today. Here's Bermuda right in here. The storm moved west of Bermuda this morning and brought wind gusts over 90 miles per hour to Bermuda. So a very powerful storm for Bermuda, even though it was able to be far enough west. Now, the good news is Bermuda is built pretty well for hurricanes, so only minor disruptions were really felt across Bermuda, despite seeing hurricane force wind gusts. The good news is the storm is now accelerating. It's almost moving at now 50 miles per hour, just under that right now, heading up towards eastern Canada. The storm will clip by eastern portions of Newfoundland later today. So the storm has now really lost a lot of its tropical characteristics and is really no longer considered a fully tropical entity anymore. So we are now calling it a tropical wind and rainstorm here at AccuWeather, and we're still going to be tracking it up through eastern Canada just because it's going to still have those impacts associated with it. So if we shift over to the projected path, like I said, Friday night, that's when we can expect those impacts in southeastern portions of Newfoundland as the storm is racing now off to the north and east at, like I said, just under 50 miles per hour. So tomorrow morning, late tomorrow morning, the storm will be past eastern Newfoundland and will be heading up into the northern Atlantic, where it will be absorbed and will hopefully not be a bother to anybody else anymore.
So it had been a Category 5 hurricane when it hit Jamaica. It has lost intensity, so now you are calling it a storm with tropical characteristics. What will people in Eastern Canada experience as the path of the storm goes by where they live?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the storm itself still has winds of hurricane force. It's still a hurricane force, or still has the power of a hurricane, essentially. It's still a hurricane force area of low pressure. It just is not essentially being fed anymore by warm sea surface temperatures. So that's why it's no longer considered a hurricane at this point, but it is still the strength of a hurricane. And so we still are calling it a tropical wind and rainstorm at this point. So as it passes closely by southeastern Newfoundland. It'll pass between about 50 and 60 miles or so, we think, to the south and east of Newfoundland. So we could still see widespread gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour, maybe on the extreme southern portion of the Avalon Peninsula there. Maybe we can see wind gusts a little bit over 60 miles per hour, but just as a general rule, 50 to 60 miles per hour winds tonight as the storm goes by, maybe an inch or two of rain as well. Luckily, it's accelerating, so we're not going to really see any of the significant flooding problems, but we could still see maybe an inch or two of rain as the storm goes by, and big time waves as well.
This is perhaps a selfish question for those of us in New York City, but there was a tremendous amount of rain and flooding in the city yesterday on Thursday, and we woke up to some significant wind today. Is that part of Melissa, or is that an unrelated weather event?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been looking into that today, and it looks like that some of the moisture from Melissa did funnel into portions of New York and into the I-95 corridor last evening during that time frame. We did have a separate area of low pressure up across eastern Canada. That was the main driver between before or a main driver for a lot of that rain that was being sucked up the coast and led to that flooding. But there was a connection to Melissa off the coast, and some of that moisture did get pulled up and into the New York City area. So I think if it wasn't for Melissa, we probably still would have seen flooding. I don't think Melissa was the primary driver, but some of the moisture from Melissa did get sucked in. So I think some of that rain and flooding was exacerbated a little bit because of Melissa, but I will say it probably was not the primary driver.
So as we talk about other weather events, if you zoom out, what else is brewing right now? Do we have to be on guard for other tropical storms or hurricanes that are perhaps forming?
Yeah, good question. So if we take a look at some of the sea surface temperatures here, this is the anomaly, so departures from average. So everywhere in orange and yellow are sea surface temperatures above average. So even though we had Melissa sitting down here, really didn't cool off the waters that much. A lot of times we'll actually see upwelling where cooler water comes up to the surface after a really powerful hurricane moves through. But since those waters were so warm and so deep, that warm water was extending so deep below the surface, we saw a little bit of cooling, but really not significant amounts of cooling. So if we look here, we can still see it's above average in most areas across the Atlantic. So we still have a month to go in the tropical season. So this is something that we're definitely going to have to watch out for. And we do actually have an area that we're outlooking in that area, or at least watching, not specifically outlooking. We don't have specific dates on that area, but this is going to be generally the area I think to watch here over the next couple of weeks. And the reason for that is, again, those really warm water temperatures in the Western Caribbean here. And there's a lot of wind shear to the north. So a lot of hostile winds across the north, across the Gulf and off the southeast coast of the United States. That should hopefully prevent any tropical development up there for at least the next couple of weeks. Those hostile winds really rip apart tropical systems. So down here in the Western Caribbean, those winds are a little bit weaker. And so that's why we think conditions are slightly more favorable for tropical development by the middle of the month. So this graphic goes through mid-November. So again, this is the area to watch. Once we get a little bit more confidence on where and when specifically those dates will be, we'll be able to put some dates on here. But for now, this is just a general area to keep an eye on. If anything's going to develop in the Atlantic over the next couple of weeks, this is kind of the area that we're thinking would have the best shot.
That is concerningly close to Jamaica. Do you have a projection for how long the island will have relief in order to start recovering from Melissa? Are they in danger of getting battered by a second storm in the next month?
Yeah, that's a good question. We think that if anything's going to develop in this area, it would likely move west into Central America at that point. Climatologically, once we move into the month of November, that's usually what we see. If we take a look at some of these development areas during the middle of November, you can see these orange areas where we would typically see storms form and move. So down in here, we would typically see storms overall move to the west. And then if they don't move to the west, we could see them move to the northeast. So places like Cuba, South Florida are not completely out of the woods yet, although we think any direct impacts chances are low at this time. We do have Jamaica in that area climatologically. Although right now it looks like if anything develops, it should stay away from Jamaica. at the current time. But again, we still have to watch for the rest of the month. But climatologically, this is still an area that we need to watch. But overall, over the next week or so, in terms of Jamaica itself, we do expect things to be mainly dry across that area. Of course, there can be a few showers and thunderstorms that pop up, but it doesn't look like there's going to be any big plume of tropical moisture that's going to be long lasting. Unfortunately, it is going to be very, very warm across Jamaica. I mean, we expect that. Jamaica's down in the deep tropics, so we do expect Jamaica to be warm. Temperatures around 90 degrees for the next several days, with those AccuWeather real field temperatures around 100 degrees. So it's going to be very warm, very humid in those areas, and that's certainly a concern because of standing water. I think there's going to be a lot of problems because of the standing water down in Jamaica, where we could have mosquitoes that could want to breed in that area. We could have an increase in the amount of mosquitoes, and mold growth as well. If that water is unable to drain out from structures or from marshy areas, again, we could see mold in those structures, and mosquitoes that could potentially be carrying illnesses breed in some of that water. So that's certainly a concern as we move forward over the next couple of weeks.
So residents will absolutely have to listen to public health officials as the coming weeks unfold. But Alex, I want to zoom out because I know you and your AccuWeather team have gathered some graphics around Hurricane Melissa and where it ranks historically. What are some of the superlatives that stand out to you that kind of help communicate just how strong this storm was?
Yeah, if we take a look in terms of atmospheric pressure, so usually the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. So atmospheric pressure is one way that us meteorologists use to kind of measure storms. So think of it kind of like this. You're in an airplane, right, and you're taking off and your ears begin to pop. That's because of a pressure change. Lower pressure is further up in the atmosphere typically, but with really, really powerful storms, that pressure essentially can come all the way down to the surface in the eye of the storm especially. So these are the highest, or rather lowest, pressures of storms that we've seen across the Caribbean in the modern era. And you can see where Melissa ranks. Melissa ranks third all time. The only two other storms that are above Melissa in terms of that strength, or below in terms of the pressure, you can see Melissa here. Melissa actually did get down a little bit lower than this. It did end up at 892 millibars. So it was the final pressure, 892. It still ranks at third all time behind Gilbert and Wilma. Wilma was the all-time lowest pressure in the Atlantic Basin at 882. So you can just see where it ranks in terms of pressure. It ranks third all time for pressure. And then another way we measure, of course, is by the wind speed as well. So you can see here, it is actually ranked tied for the strongest storm ever in the Atlantic Basin to make landfall. So these three storms all made landfall, and they're all tied in terms of wind speed for landfall. You had the famous Labor Day hurricane of 1935. That is still the strongest storm by pressure overall to make landfall in the United States at 892 millibars and 185 miles per hour. So that, for the United States, is still the benchmark storm. You had Melissa, of course, also at 185 mile per hour sustained winds at landfall, and 892 pressure as well. And then you had Dorian in 2019. That storm stalled over the Bahamas. That pressure was 910, so a little bit higher, but it did have 185 mile per hour winds. The strongest storm in the Atlantic by wind is Hurricane Allen with 190 mile per hour winds. That storm did not make landfall at 190 miles per hour. Luckily, it did lose some wind intensity, but that storm is the benchmark for wind speed in the tropical Atlantic at 190 miles per hour. And these storms are all tied at 5 mile per hour under that. But these all made landfall at this strength. So that's the difference between this one and Hurricane Allen. Hurricane Allen had lost some wind intensity from that 190 that it once was when it wasn't near the land.
A tremendously strong storm, tremendously destructive. Alex DaSilva, thank you so much for your forecast and for your analysis. We really appreciate your insight.
Thank you for having me.